I'd like to welcome you tonight to the John H. Ames reading series. Tonight we're happy to have Mordecai Marcus here to read his poetry. He's a professor of English at the University of Nebraska here in Lincoln. He received his Bachelor of Arts degree from Brooklyn College, his master's degree from New York University, and his Ph.D. from the University of Kansas. He taught at Rutgers University, University of Kansas, and Purdue University before coming to UNL. He's had poetry published in about 120 journals, as well as several chapbooks, which he will name during his reading. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you. I haven't given a public reading of my work since the summer of 1979, although I have read to my classes in the intervening years. So it's my first public reading in about 6 years, and I have to get used to doing this again. I want to thank many friends of mine for the great encouragement and help they've given me with my writing over a period of 15 years. Some are here tonight, some are not. I think they all know who they are. Before I start the reading, I want to tell you something about problems that one faces in preparing and giving a poetry reading. I always like to think first in terms of clarity for an audience. Can I choose a reasonably large number of poems that people have a fair chance of understanding just hearing them read and not having read them before? Second, for a lot of us in our time, we write very personal poems, and we don't know how much pain they're going to give us in reading them, and that depends on the audience that we're going to talk to. I decided to go light on these tonight, but I've included a few of them anyhow. And we live in a time, in a society touchy about ethical issues with constant confrontations, and many of us write poems on touchy subjects. And I've allowed one or two of those to enter into my reading tonight, one of them even bearing on things that happened partly in Lincoln, Nebraska. I also have a problem that I don't know what or not other poets have, and that is I'm in danger of laughing at my own humor, cracking up over it, and I'm in danger of crying when I recall the painful experiences that I'm rehearsing in my poems, although I'm not always rehearsing it quite truthfully. That is, sometimes, it is being exaggerated as it's being recast. In any case, I'll do my best with all of these things, and seeing a number of friendly faces here will help me a very great deal. I had planned first a retrospect by reading to you 2 poems apiece from each of my 5 chapbooks, which covers a fairly long span of years of publication and writing, and after that read from manuscript about 22 more poems, a goodly number of which have been written within the last couple of years or so. I've jotted dates down on a good many of these, and perhaps I'll fill you in on some of those. Now I'm going to start then with this beautiful little pamphlet hand-printed by my friend and colleague Greg Kuzma back in 1971, 5 Minutes to Noon, a beautiful piece of press work, and I'm going to read you 2 poems from it. The pamphlet's not paginated, but I think I'll find what I want without much trouble. I remember the occasion of writing the first poem. Although the occasion relates not too much to the poem, I wrote a check one night when I was unshaven and grubbily dressed and was asked for my identification in a rather gruff fashion, and I responded as gruffly as I could. I was in that kind of mood. But my poem comes in at that kind of experience from a different angle. It's called, Will That Be Cash or Charge? Oh, by all means, charge. How else are you and I to communicate humanly and gracefully? The ends of hoarded dollar bills are as ragged as the nerves of a financial failure. Checks are fine gestures of carefully inspected faith, but this is the warmest bond within these walls, the safest talisman. What do I say with the stamped plate? I say that money is no barrier, that I fill my needs endlessly and naturally and pay for them with the casual half of my talents and life. I tell the computer to speak the language of comfort, the language that sweeps anxiety into odd corners from which it lashes out only at incompetence and fools. I take the whole of myself and melt it down to discard the living metal, to cast the sleek globular face from the slag. My plastic wand enacts a tense ritual in this charmed world, walling it with hard, shiny blocks of assurance, while beneath my feet I feel the ashen floor, and about my head the wings of a green loss. When I wrote those last lines by the green loss, I intended nothing but the natural world, but my first readers said that I had cash in mind, and I said, wonderful. It was one of those gratuitous, extra double meanings. I was so pleased. Well, that was 15 years ago now. The title poem, 5 Minutes to Noon, reminds me that I forgot to tell you that I was trying also to choose a representative number of local poems, that is, poems that have some bearing on the city in which we live. And I always feel Lincoln again with a special kind of radiance when I read this poem, also written now about 15 years ago, with a few touches in it of the sign of the times, the early 70s. 5 minutes to noon. Where did it come from? Water on all the streets. At first, thin as a membrane in long sheets, it rose with gentle insistence. When scarce an inch deep, it lapped up over each soft curb like a film of crystal to lick at the building's edges with curious tongues. Everyone's shoes stopped and glittered in the water like cool emblems. All distances were short and long in the same instant. Suddenly, everyone hailed everyone else across strangely elastic corridors of water. Long-haired boys with flapping dungarees and bare chests, neither irony nor instruction in their eyes, hailed stolid businessmen. Cops smiled hopefully at drunkards, and painfully beautiful women smiled back warmly at homebound lechers whose eyes turned mild. Without looking to the sky or out to the city's rim, you could tell that the sunlight clung to the far edge of each street's ribbon of water while caressing its smooth expanse. For a short time, time ceased. Now I'm going on to the largest chapbook I've published so far, Return from the Desert, published in 1977. And since the first poem here makes fun of a certain measure of vanity that I hope many men share with me, I add the additional apology that I was 10 years younger when I wrote this poem, called A Man of Experience. The girls clinging to boys in movie lobbies care nothing that I have refused to age with the years. Sweet girl gallery of revolt or peace against the poise nature has lent them, their faces caressed as designing chance dangles their hair, their breasts brave emissaries. What are their boys but long-legged birds, scratching in marshes, pecking at words? What famishment could make a girl care for such sand-pebbled candy? Do these boys know how to go treasure diving to the low-slung mysteries where the world marries itself in volcanic heat? Are they shining enough to be a mirror to the core of beauty? Yet, when I look up to where I would fly with their girls, a scarecrow hovers in the air where I thought I went on eagle feathers, and the only feathers are spines on my cactus heart. My love told me there was a man she loved around those spines, and that he was a warm meadow. My flight was a cold dream. Love is here, away from the sky of mirrors. I have nothing to offer those girls. Their men are the grassy world each love must come down to. And the second poem from Return from the Desert, Summer Shadows, written about 1973 about my beloved cat who is now 17 years old, captured in his vitality and with a kind of aesthetic objectivity that one editor who rejected the poem criticized. I'll just go ahead and read Summer Shadows to you. Was it only last summer that the cat got the whole nest of baby rabbits in the deep grass near the garden slope? We found them there, mauled and dying, for he wanted the sweet chain links of blood from them all. And when I stole from him the three who were breathing yet, his whine was as strangely single-winded and not to be unpersuaded as each cheated point of his questioning ears, and his claws were curled around the prance I denied them. The ears of the mother rabbit flickered from the shadows across the street, taut as wires of despair, drinking the charge of the cat's poised lunges. But the baby rabbits were crippled and dying. I closed the sack tight, crunched the lid firm on the airless chamber of the garbage can, watched the cat ease back across the moon-eyed indifference of the hour, saw the mother rabbit hopping away from the blur of her brooding. And the third chapbook, Conversational Basketball, published in 1980, a poem that I've never read aloud. Don't know how dated this is, so I better just read you amusements and leave you to judge. It's about things that date. Amusements. The heart has gone out of our fraudulence. Goldfish swallowing and flagpole sitting were archetypes of forgotten nobilities, knocking ambition down to the tune of absurdity's melodeon. Marathon dancers dragged themselves through careful self-abuse that pleasured only others. Panty raids were overblown calls for fullness unpossessed, better left resting in its fragrant drawers. Streakers lapped like dogs at the scattered rain of our disregard. Watermelon fights never arrived to spill their challenge for the seedless pileup of our later days. Now, the captains and the kings in all of us sport on the thinning chessboard of commodities or ring the changes in the price of gold, which was much higher then. I noticed today it's down to about 360. It was up near 600 when I wrote this poem, and perhaps that helped give me material for it. Not that I'm much interested in that sort of thing. And this is Talisman, published by my friend Felix Stefanilla's very old Sparrow Press in West Lafayette, Indiana. This is published in 1981. And the first of these poems is set in a small cabin high up above a lake in Minnesota. If you keep that in mind, perhaps it'll be easier to share the sense of discovery. Although, of course, it is a poem by somebody who grew up in the 1930s. There may be a few other poems here for which that fact is of some importance. Arrival. Time, yes, but place, never. You step into the past, just a moment, and you are there. A small gas range, neatly square, worn yellow varnish of an old cabinet, and on it, a cordless coffee pot, red enameled, gently dented, tea kettle to match. Toaster without slots or a time setting. It folds open and presents your judgment. Down below, a black frying pan that will steady your fingers and crackle your eggs to a Van Gogh oil, a placid sink armed with a drain board, a separate hot tap that will burn your fingers, a wooden kitchen table steadying your elbows, while the far years lift from the lake below and rise through the boards. And now I'm going to read you a poem on a partly political subject that names a person who visited us here in Lincoln very recently. At the time I wrote this poem, I had just finished reading Robert Paine's biography of Lenin. Not a scholarly book, but a solidly factual one. I also read Robert Paine's book on Trotsky at the time. I never got to the one on Stalin. But either at the end of the two or between the two, while having some contemporary Russian poets in mind, I wrote this poem, which names the Russian poet who visited us recently. My feeling for him as a person and as a writer improved on the occasion, but I'd better not try and talk about the complexities of the kind of intuitional guesswork that goes into what this poem says. A difficult heritage. The two heads of Lenin, the pillar of fire blanketing a poster sky, the crust of skin become a nation's mausoleum. The lines that Stalin drew, the crazy razor of his brain gashing Russia's thought away, the net of steel shrouding a generation's growth. When a country's soul is half the overturned skull bowl of such hero gods, its artists stand or fall as they break through. That is why Yevtushenko's poetry gushes with the fraud of borrowed enthusiasm, while Voznesensky's pulse brings up the radiance within the grimy schist. And I'm now going to read you two poems from my latest publication, Restorations. A fold-out chapbook, another stunning piece of printing from, a recent and more complicated, well, I don't know whether or not it's more complicated, a different kind of technology, very economical indeed. I've chosen a poem here that I have read a number of times to my students, and another poem that I've never read aloud under any occasion. This poem is called Parenting. You wake up one afternoon and find these kids sitting opposite you. Boy, girl, 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 boy, boy. Maybe more, maybe 3 or 4. Who the hell are they? They're yours, your daddy, mommy, permanently signed up for what they now call parenting. You look again. The skin is nicely stretched over their bones. The flesh has a fine glow. The mouths are about to pop open, and you are about to say yes or say no. What are you doing here? This isn't as best you can recall what you put in for. You're just a child yourself. How ever are you expected to do what you've never done before? If you're very lucky, they won't bat down more than 3 or 4 of every 5 words you utter. They might occasionally find their feet headed where they want to go. That's not the way it was with your mother and father. No. They took to parenting like fish to water. When they said yes or no, they meant it. When they looked around them, walls were really there. Or were they? They never trembled like this, or never admitted they did, and maybe that's why you're rattling a door on a house that will fall unless your children help you put it together. And the title poem from Restorations, which I'm very pleased with because this experience is partly extrapolated. Some good friends of a friend came to visit him. They weren't exactly old friends of mine, but that kind of situation, your empathy spreads. And I got great pleasure out of reconstructing that kind of experience for Restorations. And I was also pleased to have it published in Christian Century, which circulates over 100,000 copies, maybe even internationally. Restorations. Those gone away from where we live day by day, our loves thinning or growing stronger, lift out of the ever-present picture and stay as they were. Some meant little to us, though we wished them well enough. Word of them comes in scattered relays that ought to move something more than the thought of well-wishing, but rarely does. Others we had listened to more closely, and they to us. Tenderness settles on their remembered current until we ask of it more than their presence gave. Then they are here. Something faded, or more fully fine but worn. All a picture snapped from a frame we never look at until we press them back to where we are. Then the picture fills an old place and the New Year's lock. I'm now turning to poems in Typescript, and you'll have to bear with me a moment while I get those out from my placement. I've got them in order here, and I think I can probably just continue to turn them down and proceed at a reasonable speed. This poem's set on what is a beloved campus for some of us, and naming a person whom some of you will know. Pastoral. Just southeast of the administration building, I plucked a small yellow-pink fruit, its slimly pointed leaves dancing like snare drums in my fingers. Plopped down in the lounge, I showed it to Paul Olson, who told me it was a wild plum. I went on to ask if he knew Auric John's poem about people who lose their souls by seeing wild plum at night. He thought it sounded wonderful, even though my quote was a botch. When I got home, my wife, digging her thumbnail into the fruit, asked how Paul could be so dumb as not to recognize an apple. And she made me shove my nail into it and sniff deep down. Next morning, Paul came around with a softer yellow-pink fruit, a little flatter at the ends, and told me this one was really a wild plum. He laughed a lot, as if the charm of error sweetened the truth. This is a poem that was reprinted in one of Alan Pater's yearly anthologies of magazine verse after it was published by the 19th journal I sent it to. Alan Pater's selection of it restored my faith in it. And one other editor has written to me, an editor who rejected some of my work, mentioned this, he'd seen this in a magazine, said, send us some like it. So, one waits a long time for pleasant experiences sometime. A Sunday walk. Where streets are like land spits in a large, faint meadow, I walked through a new-built neighborhood to see if it could take as sharp a measure as those I cut through day by day. Match-like trees bordering its distances, the grass is still low, no prairie for an old hero's dreams, nor for a spinster poet's fainting bees. Thin hedges restrain their tangled webs. Dogs are few. Young passers-by glance toward my shyness or away. With each mailbox a different sculpting in iron, bronze, enameled paint, angled and curved, varied and clean, modestly rich. The houses root in the casual innocence of profit and enterprise and ease. And another poem set in our city, Special Holiday, a poem that I had to trim down a good bit to get somebody to publish it. School is out for a special day. The teachers burrow into a conference while the children spring free. Suddenly it is noon or past. The lines in the downtown sandwich shops snake out like bullwhips. Soon the movie matinees will bubble. Watch out! Someone is coming through like a narrow-gauge railroad engine, except that it's more than one. It's a goose line of early teen girls, each with a cigarette and a reek of perfume. Delighted by your quiet wincing, they tunnel through the mountains of your solidity, their bodies whistling out, identity, identity. This one is, my cat appears briefly in this poem, and I'll just tell you that he is black and white. And I think it's only early last year that I wrote this poem called Dry Metaphysics. Why is there something rather than nothing? The philosopher Robert Nozick has given this thought a fresh turn. But here in this basement, I will have to settle for black and white empiricism. My cat stretches, yawns, gets up, turns around, sits down again. He doesn't believe that any force might contract space around him and compel his mouth to swallow the nothing of where he has been. He just gives himself a few licks, making it pretty clear why there is something rather than nothing. But on second thought, I think there is something rather than nothing because nothing wills it otherwise and fails. And this is a political poem that I have not been able to place. The date is in the title. Am I going to pronounce the Polish name correctly? I hope so. Lech Walesa, 1983. They are trying to turn this man into a pancake. He doesn't like it, but the alternatives are to be ground down, chewed up, flushed away. He likes that even less. They are trying to knock the legs off this man so that he must locomote like a crushed insect. He tries to walk. It is better than lying flat. And who are they? And do they know what they are trying to do? Or are they not trying to do anything at all, but only running through a script that others have managed to make Walesa bow to? It's like a ballet of creatures slipping on a disc surrounded by a vomit sea that just happened. They all crawl back, they lumber on, they butter their pancakes. And this poem relaying someone else's experience in lines that are a little bit close to the iambic pentameter norm. Rapport. Title with multiple meanings, at least three, so I'll repeat. Rapport. The way people communicate with one another, modes of good communication. Is there anything more I can do to please you? She asked him last. He echoes the words more in a stance than in his voice, and I can feel my way inside to how she made herself the primal ark that most men long to take against themselves to match their bodies, like a perfect bow that will arrow them quickly through the universe and leave them gently shocked and quivering against the star's backboard. But that's not all. Something longer in the central sound trembles through his voice like a celestial reed. The syllable please hollows itself so that a sweet juice pours to teach eternity the way to flow. It's softly plain, too, that neither of them needs to call the heart of this matter love. What did you do, I ask, to deserve all this? But he's too casually proud of its free clarity to touch a silver chord that would sound the smallest note of luck. And here's a poem plus the touchy subjects. I guess it's only the second, or maybe the third, called Leaders, written after reading an item in Parade magazine one Sunday a couple of years or so ago. Leaders. The Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders are good young Christian women. As they prance around in cowhide mini shorts that dip below the navel, their breasts heave like the surge of an offensive line. They sure are women. They look young and good enough if you don't get too close. But it's hard to tell what's Christian about those sweet heaves of relief they set up the pattern for. Those were here long before Christ came. And who knows what he taught these good young women or anyone else about how to make earthly passions Christ-like. The story is he felt no need that way himself, and that his disciples puzzled out how to blend its allowances into his ways. Maybe being a good young Christian woman means standing up tall and proud to whoever puts you down. This poem I'm about to read to you now is one that requires one to check the audience briefly before one reads it. But I was able to do that when I came, although there are other things in the back of one's mind to worry about. A trifle. It is called Neighborly News. They don't like anyone in the neighborhood, I'm told. Don't like our favorite couple across the street, especially their bicycle feisty children, including the way the children run over their mom and dad. Don't like the old man living alone who angles his curb crazily, backs out over his own mailbox, and has taken unseen to himself fender swipes whose news we're not relaying. Don't like the way we took vacation possession of someone's house liberties whose granting no one told them, and of which they found a way to pryingly accuse us before they were set straight in a way they won't care to continue. Don't like our cat. 16 years of tail-broken, ear-clipped, eye-softened, life-lengthening and gentling love. Of course he shits in their garden as well as ours, but who would remember anything but the act after his covering care? Don't like us, which of course leads us to feel, if not to say, well, we don't like us either, meaning we don't like what we see of them in us, don't like ourselves wound up into a spring against our mirrored wrongs. This is a 1983 version of a poem written approximately 7 or 8 years earlier. This is the 8th or 9th version of it. I kept on working on it to try and get it right. The angle is somewhat different now, and I think maybe I'm getting there. It's called A Furnished Room, and the setting is Lower Manhattan. A furnished room. Excuse me. Only September, but evening seemed to come early then to Washington Square. The greenery-enshrouded brick walks of Muse streets tricked the sight to believe that lovers live a long peace there. Newspaper lists have waved him up these stairs with a landlady manager of the Italian cafe set in the red brick base. She wipes grease delicately from her fingers and casts her eyes over him with the irony of missing tenderness, for she knows how youth will take care of itself. Around the curved stairs and into the room they go, each solemnly, for already to him every step is pretense. This place never to be, he sees, a space where he could breathe. But she offers him the bed's iron posts, the washstand's flow of relief, the convenience in the corridor, and assures him of the easy exit from the fire he has bothered to pretend to fear. No one has held his hand for months nor kissed him in a year. He waits politely to go, to leave casually open the choice he will never make. Just one thing, she shrugs in muscular agreement. No women, please. A little too harsh in the delivery there. I brought two of my blank verse poems along tonight. Not the best, because the best are personal, to the point of danger for me. This one was originally written as an exercise. I'll get to the other one a little later. And you may recognize one or two people here. Strangers. You never knew how much to trust the ploys McEwen dropped around him like raw eggs. He hoped to keep shell whole by scooping them out of their quick descent, with rasping words that grew immediately gentle. He, like all of us, shaped and unshaped his world, but did it with a marvelous trickery that it was hard to fathom. When I told McEwen how he looked and acted like McQueen, whom I was sure he'd never met, he sprang into a long rehearsed routine explaining why the bartenders downtown from place to place were showing him the door. Why, sure, McQueen was getting rowdy drunk, and everyone, and leaving for McEwen a muzzy music he was used to face, from banging by himself on claviers of wit that took the drinkers by surprise, from someone who looked tough but could talk soft and hard at once to make a jangled chord that tipped them off their alcoholic keels. Children of factories and city streets, McEwen from Chicago and McQueen from Omaha were muscle-knotted poets, more under their own tutelage than mine. I'll have to introduce them in my dreams, so they can share with me the tenderness that blooms when ruddy Irishmen resist the hooting bafflements of city groups and turn their first hostilities to love for everything so different from themselves they grasp its perfect similarity to everything they learn they really are. That's why I placed McEwen and McQueen astride a tree's great girth, flashing a saw into the wood while showers of sawdust mount, and leave it to McEwen or McQueen to pile the fragrance of McEwen's story into a truth the three of us could share. That truth will be a rich harmonium, resounding with the roughnesses I fear to hear inside myself, although without them, the hottest coal of song will flicker out. And this poem uses a word coming into much wider use in our culture for many reasons these days, not specifically why I chose it: closet thoughts. Recently accepted by a magazine that took another poem of mine that they recognized paired beautifully with this, but I won't tell you about that one tonight. Closet thoughts. Suppose one collapses and dies of a heart attack while sitting on an institutional crapper. Surely, with all that strain on aging colons, it must happen almost often.
There you are, sprawling clumsily down on the smelly tiled floor, your eyes grimly askew at the graffiti-speckled walls. What could be more impersonal and lonely than their invitations? Or, if at freshly scrubbed ones, what could be more blank of dreams? Your hand, maybe, struggles for the latch, and you extend yourself on the outside floor with your pants and underwear twisting under your knees and your hand reaching out for the comfort of a loved face. But someone will find you there, either before your breathing ceases or in the groping posture of your death, and people will begin to give you the same hushed tenderness they would accord you dying anywhere or more. They will straighten your clothes and limbs with horror, awe, and pity. Soon others will wash away the stains more tenderly, perhaps, than a mother could. And in the great silence which forbids your last participation, there will be no shame, but only regret for the inexplicable guilt that no one held you off from such a place of death. And this poem, now called Taking What's Good for You, makes me feel that I grew up in the 30s, and it's such a joy to hear from people 10, 15, 20, 25 years younger than I am that it rings true. But, one doesn't know how that relates to certain specific kinds of details, like the size of soda bottles 40 or 50 years ago. Taking what's good for you. Sleep. Sleep well. Heal. Heal quickly. And grow. Grow. Always the world lets you take and taste endless things that are good for you. Warm milk at the day's end, or cocoa, its skin skimmed clean. Ginger ale, to be drunk from the 6-ounce bottle at the corner candy store. The old couple will fish it out for you from the case's icy water. Chicken soup with sun-streaked broth to nourish away your cold, and honey thickening your tea like a smooth river to slide away your cough, and chocolate to make the afternoon's cake spread a layer of glue across your spare bones so the flesh will cling. Fish for your tired brain, this your mother's only joke. Beef for your sagging muscle. Cod liver oil for your winter pallor. Whole wheat bread and cereal bodied with bran to assert a fullness of grain inside your growth. A spoonful more of butter on your baked potato, it's good for you. A replenishment of salt on your summer ear of corn after the days of sweat. But this to come, a hand other than those that nourished you first, on your forehead and arm to mark the will of days that will be good for you in a reign of tenderness, more thoughtful of taste, fresher of tongue. Domestic poem, a little hard to paste because I got the way I got the lines set up on the page. They're not set up quite right. It's called Shoes. A closet floor, shoe strewn, ours. A couple of closets more, our sons, our daughters. My older shoes half laid aside for braver moments. Your shoes, toe curled forward, colors striping one another, your stride going faster now. Each pair an apology, not so much for its purchase as for the wear you seem to think I suppose you could make your way without, not knowing how much it is my pride to see you sprinting forward. And the children's shoes, recording now how they fight to kick back as if the next morning would find their old ones reborn, and their new ones bright as the reaches whose disappointments they lay here at our feet. This poem is called Lexicography because it is a play on just one word, popular among young people these days. Catch-all word. You'll hear it several times now. Lexicography. The dude with book open, glasses half down his nose, eyes overthrust at his class, is a professor. Blue-shirted, tieless, and lumberjack jeaned, his beard's the trimmest thing about him except for his sharp glance, sleek as a racing filly's coat, giving him the true mark of a dude. The dude cadging the downtown mainway for quarters dips his sly shoulders through a press of shyness. You can shake him off easy as flies, less with a veering lurch than with a quick dip into your pocket that takes the measure of his line, giving him the true mark of a dude. The dude gawking at the girls he can't approach is just a skinny kid whose hunger's real as yours. His fingers, lips, his you-know-what could learn the necessary tricks in as much time as a keen young chick needs to give to shape a warm slant of mind, giving him the true mark of a dude. The dude dressed fit to kill in a style neatly frilled to hide its cool formality is proud to make it hard to tell just who he is. Dentist, doctor, lawyer, loan shark, dealer, smoothing away all threatening air. His whiskey toss is comforting savoir-faire, giving him the true mark of a dude. I'm carrying two quick observational poems about insects, and so I'm not sure I'll read you the second one. Since the first one is in order here, I will go ahead with it. Approximately 65 seconds. An inert 2 inches of formed fuzz presents itself on my classroom floor. Expecting the dry wisp of a creature to flip over into an airy memento, I nudge it with my shoe. But no, it's alive. It starts off slowly towards the students. I don't think I'll kill this one, I tell them. Am I playing a kindly role, or is a voice telling me something about taking the easiest occasions of innocence? Who knows? Anyway, it picks up speed and dashes toward a row of girls who rear back. Okay, I say, I'll kill it. My soft shoe slaps down and breaks off a line of legs that go on waving. The rest is crushed to my shoe and to the floor. I wipe the remnants up with a Kleenex and knock my shoe over the wastebasket. But brown lines are wedged into the fluted sole. Later, I think, I'll clean them out. My students laugh. Class begins. I've decided to shift order and read you the other insect poem now, if it's here. No, I'm sorry. Yes, it is here. And then, depending on our time slots, I may have to make selections of those that I've got left here, especially if we're to have a little time left to talk informally. SWAT. Something is crawling on the soft brown arm of this chair. I see wings begin to spread and dread what may be a baby wasp. I stand up quick and slap down hard at it with a copy of Poetry magazine. The insect quivers to the floor, where, reaching down, I give it a good squeeze between my Kleenex buffered fingers. Carrying it to the john, I see that it's curled over like an ant, a large ant, maybe some kind of warrior. And I feel bad out of my long secret affection for sturdy anthood. I have always liked the way ants curl back on themselves in a sort of thoughtful armor. And as I dump it into the stool, I think about ants and eternity, and about how no one will take account of my brutality. There's nowhere to register this slaying, no desk at the police station or at the ant ward house to call up and report either a butchery or a necessary execution. I inspect my borrowed copy of poetry. One ear is a little bent, the cover is still unmarred, and pleasantly blue-green. I find my place, I go on reading. I do believe that's the first time I broke up with laughter. I think I've probably got time to read 4 more here and still leave a few minutes. Another blank verse poem. This one resculptured from a free verse poem that just didn't come off. The rewriting, the form gave me what I needed. So I won't tell you anything more about the poem, except, of course, in its way, it's local. Spectators. Blind father, sighted mother, uncertain children. At first glance to observers at the table across from them, awaiting our slow pizza to carry home. Eyes faintly flickering, he guides himself untouched, but takes the measure of where he is by sound and feel, while she, behind her ordinary glasses, glances at grim perimeters of fluttering children, who liked this place more than the dark where she assured her man inheritance was chance that joy must take to realize itself for all it might be worth. 3 came of this, as far as we can see. 2 boys, 1 girl. The older boy's his father's son, blind head, circling a game whose measurement is play matched to his fingers tapping on the plate. His lifted head assures the world it's true. Younger than he, the girl is almost pretty and cheerfully full-sighted without glasses. She innocently works to drown the pride she must hide from her mother in this circle. The younger boy wears glasses thick as blocks that make a kind of cage around his eyes. He seems less to see through them than around, to where his father rules the wandering roost. For something in the girl wants not to stay, although she can't evade her father's love. Especially as, for a joking moment, pressing her arm against his own, he says in imitation gruffness that it's time for breaking arms of girls who won't obey. But what she must obey, we barely guess, unless it's to stay there while Mom guides Dad towards where the separate conveniences are placed out of the line of sight of those who might concern themselves with absences. In any case, while Mom and Dad go off, the rule they leave with her is not enough, or maybe is the cause for the small boy's pushing his loosened pants so far below his waist to scratch his crotch that like a flag his penis shows, or so my daughter's frown conveys to me. When will our pizza come? When can I tell her why I riveted my sidewise glance at them, and how I thought less of the strange inheritance of sight than about hard simplicities of love? I'm going to read just 2 more poems now. One written several weeks ago, and the other also several weeks ago. Some of my friends who are here tonight may have seen or heard these. There are some new touches in them, partly thanks to your gracious criticism. Entering a liquor store. It's sort of like an undersea parlor, a little like a mansion of the very rich and tasteless, something of an alchemist's dungeon, a bit like a back porch profusely delicate with colored glass. The floor always seems to retreat before me, or to dip down like an unexpected step. Like a claustrophobic entering a tunnel, I check the distance back to safety. The clerk always floats into my vision from around angles of reflected light. I feel the way he or she has always been there, waiting and waiting and waiting, and getting ready to wait some more after I'm gone. And yet I feel the night is gentle on his or her hands. I don't feel again the weight of the clock from my boyhood's dullest jobs. I feel time here has purified itself of dust and feels easy with its own gentle emptiness. My purchases are always modest, my walk perfectly sure. I don't think much about people who must struggle not to lurch in or dash out. I skirt the apologies no one would want to hear. I heft subtle fluids, dark or light, against troubles I never hope to poison away. And the last poem that I will read to you, called Finding Our Names, is the last of most recent of the compositions that I'm going to read to you tonight, although I have written a few poems since then. It's called Finding Our Names. Plants grow out of their roots, but people grow into their names. There's a child listening to its name drifting high over the fences of afternoon. Charlie, Charlie sounds out from the flute of its mother's desperation, winging his flight over the mountains of tomorrow. After a healthy delay, he will go home, and rolling the sound of Charlie on his tongue, he will taste the stickiness that makes his mother cling. Much later, Charlie will sound differently on a girl's tongue. She will give those syllables a roll of faith. It will curl around the solidity he stole from the world before the sound was rightly his. It will become at once heavy and light. Then he will be truly Charlie. And here's another child, listening to her father repeating, Maria, Maria, Maria. This child is too young to fix the slant of words. Her father is coaxing her out of the cocoon of simple wants to recognize his need of her. But as the years rise up, Maria will become a row of hills, and as he tosses her up from his arms, calling, Maria, Maria, she will go coasting down towards a fresh rise. Later, this rise and fall will pulse her passionate being, and when her lover calls her name, she will feel its rising and return, and know that it is she compelling his breath to find in her all that Maria is.